In this episode of the Empire Builders podcast, I'm joined by the co-founder of the HDY, got that wrong in the first take, marketing agency, and also the host of Heart Radio Drive Time,
yes,
Mr. Ed James.
Hello,
welcome.
How are you?
Really well, great to meet you.
And you, mate. And
I'm really excited about our conversation here, about all things content creation, marketing, broadcasting. As I said before we recorded, I'm really nosy, which means I'm probably going to ask you loads of random questions. If there's anything you don't feel like you want to answer, just tell me to shut up. I'm more than okay with that. The first thing I want to ask, you've been broadcasting on radio a very long time.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that was a compliment, but you're welcome.
I'm not sure it was a compliment.
It was more of a statement of truth, of fact, but why a marketing agency? That seems quite random to me.
Well, I guess, yeah. So I've been on Heart for 21 years now, on breakfast, first of all, and now on drive time.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much indeed.
That was the compliment.
That was the compliment, yeah. And I've always thought, there's a lot of people who do what I do, and they almost sit in an ivory tower and they broadcast to an area. But I kind of go, well, if you're going to broadcast to an area, you need to understand the area, know how it ticks, and just know, I'm like you, I like to know things.
Yeah.
I'm nosy. So you've got to just meet everyone you can, really. So through my work at Heart, I just got to know everybody, from the TV hosts, from the mayor to the council to people who ran things. And over the years, I got a black book of pretty much the entire region. Yeah. And then off the back of that, I was asked if I know anyone who could put a stage in, or I could host something, or who could get them in the paper. It all just became hang on, this is a business. Because I'm handing all this out for free because I've got it. So why couldn't I create a business off the back of it? So that's effectively how it started.
And when did it start, marketing agency?
Well, the first one was Ed James Group, and that was with former business associate, and we had a bit of a fallout, which part and parcel of business, right?
100%.
And then HDY started just over 5 years ago, so it's just over 5 years old.
I should know this, but I couldn't find it on the website. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. HDY stands for?
How do you? How do you reach an audience? How do you grow your business? Nice. How do you attract new clients? And the idea was, it was the agency that asked the questions rather than answered them. Obviously, you do answer them ultimately, but life's about questions. And if you're not asking, and if you're not learning, and if you're not inquisitive, then there's no point.
Yeah. So a lot of our audience, we've got a real mixture of like early stage, almost startup businesses, coupled with, established long running businesses that have in some cases got, like multi-million pound in revenues and large teams. What advice from a content marketing perspective, what advice would you give, or are you giving right now to, let's talk about the kind of early stage startup businesses first. What advice would you give them?
In terms of what? In terms of
like what is the best way for somebody who's, let's say they're a new business, an early stage business, what is the best way for them to build brand, build awareness using content marketing in 2023? I think the first step is know who you are, know what you stand for, and it's amazing the amount of people who don't, and they assume who they are, and then they assume people will know who they are. No, you've got to really have a sense of self first. So there's a lot of internal work that's done, and we work with a lot of brands who kind of go, we know who we are, we know where our audience is, so we want to do this campaign on TikTok. And it's like, whoa, hang on, you've got to start way back here. You've got to really understand actually what you stand for, who your audience is, then where your audience is, and what you want to tell them. And what you want to tell them varies depending on which channel you use and which channel your audience. So it's an insight job. And a lot of people want to rush to, this is my brand, let's just get the brand out there. And then what happens as an agency, if we allow that to happen, is we then get a call going, it hasn't worked. It's like, because you've not understood who you stand for and where the people you're trying to reach are. So I guess it's that, I think, really understanding who your audience is first,
understanding the brand side of it, and then the channels come out of that.
Yeah,
and I think
sure.
it's just an interesting time. And we talk to a lot of clients because it's just, and this is the interesting bit. This is where it feeds back to being on air as well, because everyone's time poor. So you've really got to get people's attention, and you've really got to get them in the fields as well, because as you know, you're bombarded by information all the time from the minute you wake up on Twitter or X, as it's called now, or TikTok or whatever. There's just, and the news at the moment is a spiral of doom and gloom, and it's heavy. We're just bombarded by stuff. So unless you're clear about your brand and what you stand for, and you try and cut through all that noise, you're not going to get heard.
So you've been 20 plus years broadcasting. My guess is you've got quite good at being able to impact people really quickly, get their attention and keep it. I'll confess, I'm one of those people who, on the rare occasion when I'm listening to the radio, I'll flick through.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
Everyone does. So you've got to grab them straight away. Yeah. Otherwise they'll go.
So you've been doing this 20 plus years. And by the way, I suspect you're doing it in quite a cutthroat industry where really if you can't get and keep the attention, you're gone. You're not going to keep your job for very long.
Yes.
For myself and maybe some of the listeners who are content creators, I do this through podcasting and through speaking on stage. Equally, a lot of our audience will build their YouTube channels. They'll be doing reels, or they'll be doing stories on Instagram or things on TikTok. Like, what are some of the keys, or what are some of the best ways to really grab them, get their attention quick? You said sometimes you got to hit them in the fields.
Yeah.
Like, how does somebody go about doing that quickly?
A lot of it is the context. So just to kind of, and it's a value exchange, isn't it? So if I'm going to give you my time, what am I going to get back from that? What is the value I get for investing my time? So for example, this podcast. If you're going to invest half an hour, what am I going to learn? What's the information I can use? Because everybody is selfish. What can I take to make my business or my life better? And that goes for all pieces of content, and that goes for every time we open the mic on air as well. So we kind of go, you're in your car, you've got loads of other stations that you can flick from. You're probably here for the music, not for me. So I need to make sure as soon as I speak, I'm going, oh my God, you will not believe what such and such has said, or you will not believe that this is the best way to improve your relationship. All of a sudden, people are going, well, I want to know that. Of course I do. So you get hold of them in an emotional way and make them stay locked in. And that's the same with any piece of content. People make a decision so quickly. The attention span is so small that our attention span, this is a stat I really enjoy to share. The human attention span is now shorter than that of a goldfish. And I love that. But that's the world where we are now. So you just got to get them straight away with something that will improve their life.
Something you just said that really stood out for me. And it was actually not like, here's how you get their attention. It's more a belief or a mindset you have. And you said that your belief is they are listening for the music, not for you.
Yes, they are.
It would be really easy for somebody with 20 years plus broadcasting experience to go, like, I am an absolute legend. They are tuning
Which
in.
is true, obviously.
Of course it is. But it would be really easy for you to say that. Yeah. And what meaning I give that is the greater sense of humility you have, the more attractive you become. Yeah. Because if you run your show every day with the belief or the mindset that they are here for the music, they are not here for me, you're not going to make it all about you. You're going to make it about the music and about them.
Yes.
And I think that's something that I definitely notice. It's clear when you watch some content online or listen to podcasts. You can sense when the content creator is creating for themselves
100%
versus when they're creating for the audience.
And there's some big hosts that do just that. Yeah. And I hear it and I go, you're asking questions because you want to know the answer. You should be asking questions because the audience need to know. Yeah. And actually, you can spot that by how many times you hear the word you versus the word I. Yeah. And that's the first thing you learn by being on air. You always go, how are you feeling? Have you ever noticed? What do you think about? If it's all, I got up this morning and I did this, it's a barrier straight away. And that goes for a radio show or a podcast, or for content as well. I mean, it's all the same, but if it's aimed at the audience will engage way more than if it's just you spouting off.
Yeah. I know that you've worked through your content marketing agency. You've worked with some big organisations,
Yes.
some big brands. And I suppose, your advice for the kind of earlier stage business around really understanding themselves, understanding their audience, and then creating content accordingly. For the bigger brands, that they already have recognition, they already have an audience, they are already established. Like, what different advice are you giving, or would you give to them? And what I'm thinking about is, we have a mix of people listening. Some are early stages, some are startups, some are more established, some are bigger companies. I suppose we would probably sit somewhere in the middle. So I'm kind of keen to get input from you. This is selfish, by the way, to go, hey, I've got you here. If you had the Expert Empires brand, what would you be doing? It's already established in the marketplace, but like, what would you be doing to amplify it even more?
I always come back to it's stories. And it's about how you tell stories. And that's what I love, because it's a leveler, really. No matter how big your brand is, we've been learning stories and we've been hearing stories since we were born. Here's the thing. Everyone gets hung up, I think, a little bit on brand and content and engagement, but actually it's people. What you're doing, no matter what part of it you play, you're talking to people. We are talking to people. On air, I'm talking to people. When we do a campaign, we're trying to talk to and make someone feel something. And people overlook that, and people overcomplicate it. And all that is stories. So when we're born, we tell our kids stories. We're doing the same thing. What's the story of your brand? So we're doing some work with Severn Trent right now. So they are a water utilities company, but they do so much in the charity space, and they want to make the region a better place. Now, that's story. So you could go, here's our water, it's clean, it's whatever, but that doesn't engage with people. What does engage with people, that they care about where they live, they care about who else lives there, they care about making people's lives better. That's a story. So you just have to work out how best to tell that story so it really hits people and lands.
So you mentioned Severn Trent you're working with at the moment. What's the most impactful campaign, in your opinion, that your agency, your company's been part of, has created over the years?
Two spring to mind, and they're both So one was a thing called Dear Brum. So Birmingham's poet laureate Casey Bailey did a really well-known piece a few years ago called Dear Brum, which is his love letter to our city, effectively. And we reworked that as a piece of content just before the Com Games.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, he's a genius, but we brought that to life. So we kind of shot that, and we projected almost his thoughts inside him. So when you saw him talk about his love of our city and the history, both good and bad, it's a hugely emotive piece. You actually saw what he was thinking displayed. We almost did like a green screen, but on him, so it looked like the emotion was coming out of him. And he talked about the rivers of blood, and we talked about some really hard stuff, but then looked at the future of the city and where we were heading. That was really powerful, because it was of the city at a time where the Com Games were about to come and the world's eyes were on us. So that was a really nice piece. The other one, which we're all really proud of in the agency, didn't have a client. And that's what I love, when you get a team of people who love what they do and they want to make a difference. We did a piece called Hands Against Hatred. And there was a guy who was attacked in the gay village in Brum. He was glassed for no reason, apart from he was walking down the street holding hands with his husband. And he was attacked. And there was a massive outcry, understandably, in Brum. But what we did, we launched a campaign called Hands Against Hatred, where we encouraged people just to hold hands. And the impact and the shares and the reach that had was huge. But again, what made it so powerful, I think, it wasn't that there wasn't a client attached. It was just, we felt really strongly about it. It was something horrendous happening where we live. And through creativity, we were able to do something that made people feel something. So those kind of things, I think, are the sweet spot.
And with the Hands Against Hatred, is that what it's called? How were you able to utilize your broadcasting in amplifying that, if at all, or was it a standalone campaign?
No, we talked about it on air, and I shared it on my. In fact, it's the most liked LinkedIn post I've ever done, and the most liked Instagram post I've ever done as well. And I'm trying to think, because I don't know, it's easy to, and again, this is a really interesting one. You have to have a point of view and an opinion if you want to stand out.
Yep.
And actually, the world's a crazy place at the moment because people are getting cancelled, and there's a fear of, well, if I have this opinion and I stand by it, what will happen? But actually, that's the only way. You've got to have a belief that you stand for and stand proudly for it, and that's how people can identify you. So yeah, I'm trying to do more of that at the moment. But it's interesting that when you have something that you hold dear and you share it, a lot of people they get what you're trying to say, and that's a really powerful thing actually. And that goes for brands as well. I mean, as a brand, what do you stand for? And actually embrace that and turn up that bit rather than trying to hide. And the days of being all things to all people are over. So, and again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Who are you? Own that, be proud of it, and communicate that.
Yeah, you've said a few times, the world's a crazy place. You probably have greater insight than most because, through broadcasting, you meet anybody and everybody, as you said, people that work in, of course, our city. One of the reasons I wanted Ed on the show is, you're, of course, you've got a massive, amazing insight into our city, and I'm Birmingham born and bred, and also, you've got the marketing agency, which of course makes this really relevant for our audience as well. You've said a few times, the world's a crazy place right now.
It is.
What are you seeing? I'd like to hear from both points of view. Like, as a business owner, like, what trends, what patterns are you seeing right now? What challenges are you seeing? What solutions are you finding? And also, I'd just like to hear, like, on a broader scale, when you think about the world at large, the economy, politics, these are areas that I guess as a broadcaster, you need to understand all of them.
Yes.
And you also really need to understand the person who's listening, which could be anybody.
Yes.
So I just want to hear some of your current thoughts on the economy, on politics, on the world. Like, how do you see it?
Well, it's a shit show, isn't it?
Aren't you glad you tuned into this positive podcast? It's going to
give you lots of great news. Here's the thing. I'm an optimist, and I always have been. And I think I annoy people because I always think everything will be all right. I genuinely do. And I've done a lot of NLP work, and and it's about you attract what you think about, and what your brain can see is normally what happens. Yeah. So if your brain goes, it's all fucked, there's no point, well, guess what? That's the path you will walk down, because what you see in your mind will become a reality, effectively. So I'm an optimist, but to answer, I think, part two of your question, the world's hard at the moment. The world is really hard, and I'm trying to not watch as much news now and not expose myself to as much news.
Which you kind of can't avoid.
Which I can't do, because every hour there's a news bulletin on the show. But there is a cycle of, God, if you look at it, if you look at the past few years when we've been through Brexit and then all the, obviously, COVID and the lockdowns and then the war and then the cost of living crisis, it's no wonder people are struggling, because actually it's just hard. It's hard to pay your bills and your expenses. Everything is more expensive than it's ever been, and the news has never been as morbid as it is now. So it affects people. So from the on-air side of things, I'm speaking to people who are finding it tough, and we've just got to get through this. I've got no doubt it'll improve, and everything's a cycle, but it's tough at the moment, and I do feel for people who are struggling.
And I think that speaks to what you mentioned earlier, which is you got to know your audience.
Yeah.
And you are aware that most of the people who are tuned into your show are struggling, suffering.
Everyone is struggling.
And I think this is probably one of my biggest blind spots. is because I'm so optimistic,
Yeah.
because I'm a business owner or an entrepreneur, I'm always thinking bigger, better.
Yes.
Sometimes I can miss the mark,
Right, okay.
because not everyone sees it that way. But
Yeah.
that I'm so convicted in my belief that
which is good.
we can create our own reality,
Yeah.
and we're in charge of our financial circumstances, and we can take control of our health and the quality of our relationships and all of that. I'm also aware that probably alienates my audience a little bit sometimes. How do you create that? What do you think? How do we create that balance?
It's about being real, I think. So a brand like Heart, our strapline is feel good. And that's what it's about. Our music is that, our competitions, our entertainment. It's all very positive. And pre-lockdown, that was absolutely right. Because that's where everybody was. Everyone was optimistic and everything's fine. And then actually it became really important. And our audience told us that we were fantastic and we were great for them in that time, because it was a lonely time and a scary time. So to have a friend on air really helped. We've kind of gone through both of those times, and now we're in this period where things are tough. So if you turn on a radio show and hear, hey, everything's great, you're going to go, fuck off, it's not great. But it's about being real, but also optimistic. It's about that, I think. It's about right now, things are okay in terms of, and that's why I'm a big fan of being in the moment, because actually right now, your anxieties are in the future. So let's try and plant ourselves in the moment and remember that there's no threat in the here and now. Anxiety is just fear of what could go wrong in the future. So if you bring it back to now, everything is all right. And it's trying to do that.
I suppose from an NLP perspective, it's pacing and leading the audience.
Yeah.
I guess the only challenge I have for that is, what about the pattern interrupt that gets their attention? It's kind of like you can't have both.
Yeah.
Like, we want to pace and lead. We want to meet the audience where they're at and then help them become more optimistic.
Yes.
But equally, like, if we're too vanilla, then we don't get their attention in the first place.
Exactly.
And, I've got a lot of friends who are content creators, and the way they influence is through pattern interrupts.
Yes.
Like, everything is a pattern
absolutely,
interrupt.
yeah.
The first thing that comes out of their mouth on the video will, like, slap you around the face.
You've got to do that, because that's how to get attention.
Yeah.
And I guess part of that is not fake positivity, but it's when you get the chance to embrace things that are really good, you turn those up. Yeah. So, for example, yesterday we had the guy who'd just been awarded the best bus driver in the UK, and he's from Brum, and he beat everyone, beat Manchester, London, all the rest of it. So you get him on, and you embrace that, because our region has smashed it. So it's a case of with all of this, you look for the good stories and the positive stories and the wins, and you amplify those. Yeah,
I suppose it's probably my biggest bugbear or frustration with the media in general. Is like, I do believe there are good stories everywhere.
Yeah, there are, and we don't highlight them.
And by the way, again, this is where probably unpopular opinion. I go, in COVID, in lockdowns, there were success stories.
Loads.
Now, not saying that they weren't the norm, but they were there. And equally, there were a lot of people that found it really challenging. But that's the case always, regardless of COVID, Brexit, lockdowns, cost of living, any of these things. Like, there's always good stories, there's always not so good stories, and it's where the focus goes. I guess my frustration is I feel like it's 90% on the negative,
it is,
and like 10% on the positive. And I personally would like to see that more balanced. But then again, I'm probably not representative of the country as a whole.
It's an interesting point, because the bad news sells.
Yeah.
Whenever there's a tragedy or something, everyone and you look at the comments on Mail Online or whatever, people pile in because people seem to like it.
And they're broadcasting to business.
Yes.
Like you can come with all the positivity you want, but if no one tunes in,
exactly
you're getting shut down, you're getting fired. Like, you've got, it's tough, isn't it? It's really tough.
It is. Have you heard? There's a bit. I brought a book out a year or so back, and in that book we talk about a thing called the Stockdale paradox.
Okay.
Which is a brilliant example of. It kind of helps us explain what we went through in the lockdowns, but it explains what we're doing now. He was a general, and he was captured and tortured, and a lot of the people he was with died and they gave up and they lost hope. He maintained his composure throughout it, and he escaped and he got out in the end, and he held his mindset, and he was asked afterwards how he managed to do it. And I love this because it's effectively, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it's basically, don't lose sight of the reality where you are, but also don't lose hope that things will get better and you will get through it. And I love that because it's not about, hey, everything's great. It's about, no, it's really shit and it's tough and it's hard. And you need to embrace and accept that. But equally, you need to have the hope and the trust that ultimately it will be all right, whilst embracing that it's pretty hard at the moment. And I just think that's a fantastic way of approaching quite a lot of things.
I agree. From a business owner's perspective,
Yeah.
what, like you said, things are tough right now,
Yeah.
globally. From a business owner's perspective, what is your current experience? What are you finding challenging, difficult? What's working right now in the agency? Might be useful for our audience to hear that.
I'm a big believer in big brands are built in hard times. There's a lot of examples of that in the past, and basically in a recession, which I know we're not officially in, but it feels like we are, people stop spending. So the ones that increase their spend or maintain their spend increase a share of voice because the market isn't as congested. So we're working with a few clients who are taking advantage of that at the moment and increasing their share of voice. But in terms of where we're at, I mean, I guess it's just, again, I just like to break everything down into people. So if everyone is nervous on a human level, that's going to happen from a business point of view as well. And I think that's exactly it. What we're finding, and actually I'm speaking to a lot of other agencies and a lot of other brands, it's not that clients are saying no, they're just really slow with stuff. So they're going, I'm not saying no, but I'm not quite sure what the next 2 months will be like. We got a cash flow issue. Let's just slow it down. But the issue is, if everyone slows it down, everything stops. So that's what we're finding is a bit of a challenge right now. It's not that our clients are saying no, that it's just slower than it's been for a long time. But there are what's really interesting is there are then clients who go, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this. So I've just got off a phone call now, where we've just had a fantastic win that I wasn't sure we would get. So people,
they're nice, aren't they?
They're nice.
They're nice surprises.
They're nice when you don't expect it as well. You're like, no, I don't think this is ours. And then you get a phone call, it's all fine. So people are spending. And I'm like you, I'm an optimist too. And there is opportunity, a huge opportunity out there. So it's not doom and gloom. You've just got to look harder and work harder, I think. I think that's it. It feels like you're working 3 times as hard to stay where you were, which is fine if you're okay to do that.
And so a lot of the companies or the organisations you work with are kind of bigger brands. Are you finding that sales cycle slowing down is the main thing? Yeah. Are you seeing that with big brands and smaller companies alike?
Yes, and cash flow seems to be an issue. And cash flow is an issue for a small business, obviously, all the time. But I think I've been a bit shocked by even some big brands are having the same, the same questions. And everyone has to justify what they're spending, which again is why a data-led approach to everything. It's not a finger in the air. It's okay. You're spending this. These are your clicks. These are your results. This is the audience that we've driven. It goes into that side, I think, as well.
Yeah. With the smaller companies in particular, because I think most of our audience, probably a small percentage, would work with larger clients. Yeah. A lot of them work with the smaller businesses. Like, I guess what I'm wondering is, what are the best ways we can find to navigate that? Like, how can we best navigate the cash flow problem? And do you think that's a knock-on effect of COVID, bounce back loans, C-bills?
It's all of that.
Like, is it just that that is running out? I don't know. Like, what's your view?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I just think it's. We've always tried to be fairly lean. And
how many you got in your team?
Well, we've got about 32 in our team now.
Oh, wow.
So, but lean as well in terms of we don't take a lot out of it, and it's about what is your business there for. And there's a book called The Infinite Game, which I love,
Yes.
and I'm sure you're a fan as well. And it's about, are you building something that will stand the test of time and that will be around for a long time? Therefore, it's not short term. It's not taking the cash out. It's not spending when you don't have to spend. It's about being quite prudent and being quite lean because you want to be around for a long time. So I think it's that, and being sensible and looking for who you can work with and collaborate. I think that's a big thing about where we are now as well, and how you can share resources. I think that's where we're at. I mean, but in terms of us, we've got a decent accountant who's old school. He used to run firms in the Black Country, and he's always a bit like, unless it's in the bank, you can't spend it. So a PO's in, but it's not. It's the old school way of doing things almost, isn't it? Unless it's in the bank and you've paid tax on it and you've got enough to pay the team for the next three months, don't bloody spend it.
Yeah, which is a super conservative approach, but probably has like helped you like survive, thrive over the last few years.
Has, yeah.
I'd love to say that I subscribe to that same philosophy. That would be a lie.
Okay.
Look, my tolerance for risk, I'd say, is pretty high.
Yes.
My accountant would say that I'm crazy, and most of the team are like, I can't believe you're doing this. But that's why I've always been.
Is that in terms of investment or launching new things or
everything?
Everything.
But like, I mean, investment in growth, in advertising, in speaker fees for people to come to our events. Like, I've always been quite aggressive.
Yeah.
But just always backed myself.
But that works.
Ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, it does, and I do think that I think your advice is good for the majority of people that maybe don't carry the same tolerance for risk that I do. And I think what I've read into what you just said is, like, if the sales cycle is slower, you, with your approach, Ed, can afford to wait.
Yes.
If you have a less conservative, more aggressive approach, you can't afford to wait.
Yes, I get
maybe,
that.
And that's where you end up with cash flow issues. So I do think that depending on your personality style, depending on your risk profile, different approaches
100%
are advisable. But right now, I think you by the sounds of it, you've benefited massively from that kind of more conservative approach.
And I think it also means, because risk is hugely important, and if you don't take risks, you don't do anything really. So risk is a big thing you need to factor in. But I always think if the platform's there, you can take more risks. So it enables you. And I kind of, in terms of just to bring that back to an on-air standpoint as well, there's always a plan for the show. If there wasn't a plan for the show, it would sound out of control. However, when there is a plan, you can spot something, or you can get a text or a caller, and you can do anything you want because there's a net underneath you that will catch you. And it's the same here. If you're run in an efficient way, you can take some risks, and you should take some risks.
Who's the most interesting guest you've ever had on your show?
Good question. Probably Sir Paul McCartney.
Oh, wow. Just a small name.
Small name.
Just a small, insignificant name. Only one of the most famous musicians of all time.
Yeah, he did a gig at the arena in Brum a few years back, and we got the chance to interview him backstage ahead of his gig. And I remember this, and I tell this story a lot because he's arguably one of the biggest stars in the world, right? Sure. He's just known across the world. And he was 5 minutes late for our interview, and he arrived by himself, no entourage, and apologised for being late. And I'm like, you're Paul McCartney.
No ego.
I would have waited here for all afternoon, kind of thing. And he was brilliant, and he talked about anything. A lot of stars we get, you get a list from their people about what you can and can't. Yeah, and what you can't ask them about this. But he was just like, and I actually said to him, "Is there anything?" He went, "No, fine." It's like, okay, you're pretty good. Ed Sheeran as well. We interviewed Ed Sheeran ahead of his gig in Brum, and again, ordinarily you're put in a room, and then they bring these people to you, and it's a process. Ed was just loose backstage with everyone else. He introduced himself. he's the nicest guy, no ego, no airs and graces. And it's like, okay, that's the reason you're successful, because you're a grafter, obviously hugely gifted, but just a really nice guy. And that's the thing, we're all human beings. Why? And again, I hate this. A lot of people have egos, and you need a bit of an ego to do what we do, but we're just people. We're all just people, and Ed's a person, and Paul McCartney, and it's nice that actually you can just interact with them and just feel that it's a relaxed environment.
What's the biggest risk you've taken? We talked about taking risks and of course, getting attention. And so sometimes you need to be a bit disruptive. What's the biggest risk or risks you've taken as a broadcaster?
In business or as a broadcaster?
Let's do both, shall we?
Okay, in business, it's probably just a decision to start a business It is a risk. And I think all the entrepreneurs, I know you've got a huge audience on this podcast, but everyone needs a pat on the back, because it's hard, lonely, it's a lot of work, it's amazing and fun, but there are easier ways to make a living, way easier. And actually, to start a business is a risk, and to grow a business is a risk.
And by the way, for you, double, triple, because if you fail,
well, I have done.
If I fail, I'm not sure I would have took the risk if I'd have had the profile you've got at the start. Like, I was 25, 26 years of age, no one knew who I was. So I go, well, if I fail, it will be like my friends and family that are going to know about it. That'll probably be it. If you set up a business and it fails, that's news, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, and it was. I had a business that went bump a few years ago, and I was front page of all the press. And it was hard, but it doesn't kill you. Yeah. And that's the other really interesting thing. When you go through really hard times, I've been bankrupt and all the rest of it, and it's part of, and unless you go through that and you go, hang on, I've lost everything, but everything's still all right, and I've still got the ability to do things. It's quite empowering almost. And that's the other thing I'd say. Try things, and if you fail, who cares, actually? It's the people that don't try that don't ever achieve anything. So as long as you're trying and taking risks, then that's what life is about, I think. And as you get older as well, you realise that no one really cares. When you're young, you think, I'll be judged by friends and family and the media, but no one really gives a shit, because everyone's dealing with their own stuff. So that I find quite empowering, because it gives you the ability just to try stuff. Some bits will work, some bits won't. But in the grand scheme of things, in 100 years, we'll all be dead. So who cares?
Yeah.
But I think that's quite a nice way of seeing it.
Yeah, it is. It is. Definitely removes. It makes it feel a lot more lighthearted.
Yes.
And a lot less serious.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about risks in broadcasting?
Risks in broadcasting, I think it's a good question. I think there's
obviously, getting someone like Sir Paul McCartney or Ed Sheeran, that's going to be a home run. There's no way that's not going to increase your profile, get more listeners.
Yes, exactly.
That's a home run. What about some of the ones you're like, I'm not sure this is going to go so well, but I'm going to take the risk anyway?
The beautiful thing about being on air, and I think about life is yes, it's a risk, but if it goes wrong, what's the effect? In terms of being on air, the only thing that can cause you a problem, really, is if you or a guest says something that they shouldn't. So you mitigate those risks. But apart from that, you have a guest on that you're not sure about, and you try it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But actually, the great thing about being on air is it doesn't have to go the way you think it will. So if you make a mistake, or things go wrong, or things don't go according to plan, that's still entertaining for the audience. So actually, it's not about risk. As long as you're not saying anything that can get you into trouble with Ofcom, it's kind of fine. And that gives you the ability just to try stuff. And the audience really like it when things go wrong. Yeah. And you look about Piers Morgan when he quit. That's the most talked about bit of TV in the past few years. Did he take a risk in doing that? I don't think so, because it's just supercharged his career. So I just think, the audience really enjoy it when it's not perfect.
You're not from round here.
I'm not from.
You've got no accent, by the way, which I'm very jealous of, because as much as I feel like I've lost it over the years. I've still got the Brummie accent.
You have, but that's a great thing. It's a great thing.
Well, it is when you're in Birmingham, not so much when you're outside of Birmingham. People go,
no, you should embrace it. It's good.
So, where are you from originally?
Born in Wales, moved to Yorkshire when I was, I think, about 8-9 months old. So I was kind of raised in Yorkshire. And then I've worked all over, but mainly in the north. So I was a student in Newcastle upon Tyne, and then I worked in the northwest for a bit. But I've been in the Midlands since 2000, so a long time.
And what brought you to the Midlands? Was it Hart?
A job? No, station called Mercia in Coventry.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got a job there, and I did, I think, about a year there, then a year at Beacon in Wolverhampton, and then Hart since 2002, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. And I think I read somewhere that you actually started broadcasting from a very early age.
I did. I was 12 or 13, I think. Yeah.
What led? Because by the way, that in itself is quite a risk, isn't it? Like that's not. Take this the right way. It's not normal.
It's not
for a 12-year-old to go. You know what? I think I want to broadcast. I think I want to do a radio show. Like what made you want to do that?
Well, it's about, I think, what you're exposed to. So my mum at the time, and still does, she did bits on the station in York. Mm-hmm. So it was on in the kitchen, and we used to listen to Mum on the radio, which was mind-blowing. It's like, there's Mum who takes me to school, and she's now on air having a chat about food and home economics. And it's like, okay, mind-blowing. And then I got the chance to go in and watch her, and the radio environment blew my mind, and it still does. It's not like a real world. It's not like work. The station, whichever station it is piped round into every room of the building, including the loo. It's fun. It's amazing. People act like kids. It's a fantastic world, and I got the bug as a 12-year-old effectively, and then the station that Mum worked on ran a competition for a kid to go in and present like a What's On guide for Easter. So I entered it, and I ended up winning. So I was on air, I think, every day in the Easter holidays, doing like a, hey kids, here's what's on near you. And again, I got the bug, and I'm still very humbled and amazed to still be on air all these years later, and the other doors it opens. Because actually, I think, and as you'll find, the ability to communicate is one of the best skills. And I try and teach my kids that. It's like, okay, you can have all sorts of skills, but if you can talk to someone and get them to see what you're saying and get them to buy into your vision or your dream, there's nothing you can't do.
Who were your, like, in your very early kind of broadcasting career, you were 12 years of age, who did you really look up to? Who did you admire? Who were your heroes?
I think Terry Wogan is the ultimate radio presenter. I just think, again, because what your job on air is to talk to one person. Yeah. Well, I believe it is. Not everyone thinks that, but I just think it's very intimate, and the medium is a personal one. So you should be talking to one person. So it's all about good morning, how are you feeling? It's supposed to be a relationship between two people. So I don't subscribe to the, hey everyone, how's everyone doing? It's like, well, no, just talk to me. And I think he was the master at that. He was the absolute master at it. And he sets the bar so high. And I just think he can be held up as just intimate, warm, just a wonderful broadcaster.
Yeah, I think the talking to one person rather than, hey, everyone.
Yeah.
I learned that very early in my career, writing copy.
Yes.
So written communication, I feel the same, whether you're writing web copy or whether it's an email campaign, whether you're broadcasting. Like, I think that mindset when you're creating content in whatever format it is, I think that's really valuable and useful for anybody who's creating content. And as you know, many of our clients or our listeners are going to be coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, authors, agency owners themselves. So they are going to be communicating through various different media with an audience. And I think that's great advice.
It is. How do you tell a story to make someone feel something? That's effectively what we're all doing.
Yeah, great. What are you most optimistic about or excited about right now?
Just opportunities, I think. And I think you hit upon it earlier on. It's a mindset. And actually, if you live in the moment And if you wake up and embrace where you're at and embrace the day and expect good things to happen, then the chances are they will. You know, I sometimes struggle. You wake up in the morning and your head is full of things that aren't right or things that you've got to do, things that aren't where you need them to be. But actually, the day's fine. So you may as well start with a better mindset. So that's something I'm trying to really work hard on at the moment. And it's just that, isn't it? Having a positive outlook, because there are still lots of things to look forward to. And actually, we're alive right now. The sun is out. Everything's feeling good. So try and this isn't a preachy thing. I'm trying to do this. Take that into the world and see where that goes.
Great advice. Where can people find out more about you? Obviously, they can listen to art in the West Midlands in Birmingham. Where can people find out more about you and the work you're doing with the agency, etc.? Where's the best place for them to follow you?
All online, so HDYAgency.com online, or I'm on all the platforms. I'm really enjoying LinkedIn at the moment. I don't know about you. I'm just getting a lot of...
it's not my primary platform.
Why not?
I don't know. I've just never really felt like... It's never really felt home for me.
Has it not? That's interesting.
I don't know why. I suppose it might also just be that, you know, I started using social media when Facebook was in the ascendancy, and so that was always my go-to.
Yes.
Probably still is to an extent, more so on Instagram now. So LinkedIn would be a great place for them.
LinkedIn, I'm there. Instagram. Yeah. I'm not on TikTok. Well, I am on TikTok, but only to look. I'm not a TikToker.
What's your Instagram handle?
@EdJames_.
Okay. At @EdJames_. Yeah. Go check out Ed there.
Thank you.
Listen, thank you so much for sitting in the other seat for a change.
I've really enjoyed it.
Interviewed rather than being interviewed. So thanks so much for coming in. It's been great to meet you, and I'm sure we'll hang out more.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.